Hi, team. This is Dawn. I wanted to record this video as I felt it might be the easiest way to review our updated guidance. Um, we have been sort of dinged by national headquarters for not working the onboarding process in alignment with the metrics. And so I wanted to take some time to review what our timeline looks like for working with new referrals and onboarding our volunteers into disaster cycle services. I also wanted to show you what when I refer to the 3 key milestones, I want you to know what they are and how you appropriately document them. So I'm going to show you how to do some documentation, and we're going to have some subsequent workshops that are going to focus on some of the new tools that Volunteer Services has provided us to use. I'm going to show you, kind of talk briefly about those, but we'll continue to build upon this. But what's really important today is that we discuss our timeline, and then I'll show you how to document. So probably the most significant change for some of us is that in the past, we've approved the referral right away, and then we've taken 30 days or longer to work with that volunteer and to get them through onboarding. What's changed effective immediately is that you cannot approve referrals right away. Because working the referral, there are some time-bound metrics that occur from the moment that you receive the referral and the moment that you approve the referral. So moving forward, you need to work your referral within 7 days. And during that 7 days, you need to be able to make 3 contacts to the volunteer. By day 7, the referral must be approved or rejected. And you can only approve the referral if you've talked with the volunteer and you've completed an initial interview. And that initial interview is one of the key milestones that we have to document a certain way on the profile. Upon receiving a referral, please call the referred prospect within 48 hours to welcome them and complete a short interview. If you leave a message, ask that they call you back by no later than day 7. If you're sending an email, you do want to follow up your left message with an email, because that's your second contact, your second attempt to connect. You want to also request that they call you back by day 7. And make sure that you're stating in both your email and on the voice message that if you don't hear from them by day 7, they can reapply for the position when they're ready to get started. You're still going to make a third contact, which you can do any time between your first left message or an email and day 7. And that third can be a phone call, a text message, or an email. And you basically want to tell them at that juncture, if they haven't called you back or emailed you, if you haven't been able to talk to them, you basically want to tell them at that point, hey, I haven't heard from you. If you're still interested in this position, please reapply for it. And we'll assume you're not ready to get started at this time. And then you reject the referral. Before you call the volunteer and facilitate that first interview, you're going to want to review the volunteers or the prospect's volunteer connection profile. As you know, a lot of our volunteers are referred to as new, but not every volunteer is new. Some may already assume other positions in disaster services or other lines of service. You want to make sure that you take a look at their resume and any attached documents from volunteer services. And you're going to want to use a new tool, which I'll introduce you to after the presentation, which is the department interview guide. There are questions called 5-dimension definitions, and each of these definitions have specific questions that you can incorporate into your interview. So you want to have any questions ready before you call, and you also want to have the position description handy so that you can reference it, review it with them as necessary, and answer any questions they might have. So of course, you introduce yourself when you're talking to them, explain your role and how you will be supporting them, describe the position to them as applicable, and validate that they understand the purpose of the role. Ask questions from the interview checklist that lend well to the role that they're interested in, and validate that they agree to the requirements of the role and have the time to commit to it. Then you're going to ask them at the close of your interview to complete the orientation the same day if possible, and you're going to schedule a second interview in no more than 7 days. Now, I'll explain to you the importance of scheduling a second interview in a moment, but during your first interview, if you've deemed that yes, this person's going to be good for this position, I think they're going to work out okay, then you approve the referral. And you assign the volunteer immediately to the territory by adding the territory general disaster workforce position to the profile. This is very important, and this is a step that's sometimes missed. It's really important that we assign them to the territory so that they're going to be added to the full disaster cycle services group share for that territory. And it's also important from an auditing perspective, because when we review your roster and kind of scrub rosters, we're looking at that full roster. If you don't assign your volunteer to your territory, it's very easy to lose track of them. And sometimes, especially if they're disaster workforce trainees, it can be like trying to find a needle in a haystack. If you don't remember the name of the volunteer, well, they're not going to reflect on your rosters. And if they don't have a territory specific position, it's very easy to overlook them and very easy for them to fall through the cracks. So you want to make sure that that doesn't happen. After you approve the referral, please get into the habit of adding them to the territory by assigning that general disaster workforce position. And then you're going to document the interview, and I'll show you how to do your documentation. And you schedule them for an orientation. Technically, you're providing them with a link to the orientation, so they should be able to complete that right away. So you have the option, you can go ahead and make a documentation that the orientation is in progress, or you can just hold off on that until the second interview and document that the interview is completed. So while you're scheduling the second interview, you also want to make sure that you ask them to complete the disaster cycle services and overview and concept of operations basics courses. The orientation, 2 trainings, and second interview must be completed within 7 days, because by day 14, the full onboarding process with DWET should be complete. And there's no wiggle room for the volunteers that are not responding or moving forward with the process. We're going to have to be a little bit more aggressive in telling them, or well, aggressive is probably not the best word. Be more assertive, I should say, to let them know, hey, we need you to complete this by this date, and if you can't, then this probably isn't the best time. Maybe you need to reapply for this role once you have the time to commit and complete these steps. So the orientation has been revised to better flow. They're going to complete the orientation right after your interview, and then it segues well into the disaster cycle services and overview. and concept of operations basics courses. Okay, so you schedule the second interview, and after the first interview, they have however many days you decide upon, but no more than 7, to complete the orientation, disaster cycle services and overview, and concept of operations basics. During the second interview, you're confirming again that yes, they're interested in this role and they understand the expectations and they want to move forward. It's during this conversation that you're going to provide them with the gap chart and identify any additional interests they might have. You're going to review the training requirements and establish a due date for completion of the training. Disaster trainees need to be promoted to their service associate position within 90 days. So they have to understand that there's only a 90-day window that they're able to complete training requirements. They have to be ready to work through that process. And if there's any concerns, they need to be upfront with you so that you can work a plan with them that will work. But 90 days is that's what national headquarters is going to be auditing us. That's what they want to see. Now, the disaster action team trainee does have 6 months to complete training requirements, but the target should still with them be 90 days. 6 months is really too long. Shouldn't take that long to get through the DAT training, but you can negotiate up to 6 months for that position if there's need. This is also the conversation that you would provide the health status record. You would review, answer any questions regarding physical capacity, and you'd also provide the disaster action team responder wellness form if they're going to be a DAP member and not choose any other gaps, I should say. Use spot check to ensure understanding of how to log volunteer hours, how to use Edge and the Exchange. You're going to obtain a photo for a name badge if they haven't already provided that. And you're going to coordinate with the DPM or DPS if the volunteer is going to need a Red Cross email to use a Red Cross computer to complete training. You want to make sure that they know how to use the disaster training calendar and shift tools to sign up for opportunities. So these are the things that you need to make sure that you're covering during the career path discussion, because when you've completed the career path discussion, the next step is to make the introduction to the supervisor during the career path summary. So you're going to send the career path summary email after you've completed the second interview. And that career path summary interview should really, it should summarize everything that you discussed with the volunteer during the second interview. You're reminding them of the training they're required to take, the due date for completing the training. You're reiterating, confirming the positions that they've decided to pursue, and you're just summarizing what you've discussed. And in that same email, you're making the introduction to the supervisor. You're including the new supervisors on that email, and they are then responsible for outreaching to the volunteer within 14 days from the date that you make the introduction to complete an activity-specific orientation and provide for hands-on engagement. And at that point in time, your job is now to track the volunteer's progression. You want to add them to your tracking spreadsheet, or you want to use the promotion manager to track their progress. And I'm going to show you how to use promotion manager briefly. And you want to make sure that you're scheduling yourself to follow up with the volunteer every 2 weeks from making that introduction to the supervisor to ensure that that second orientation has taken place. Ideally, as we move forward, more and more of the supervisors will train and they will learn to document their own activity notes. So as they're outreaching to volunteers, they too are placing notes on the profile, but not all of our activity leadership will do that. So it is our responsibility to make sure that we're following up, to make sure that those conversations are happening, to offer our support as needed, and to ensure that the volunteer stays on track so that they can be promoted to service associate within the appropriate 90-day allotment. So thank you. That is the timeline that we're working with. I will be updating our SOP to reflect this guidance, so you will receive that within the week. I will also make sure that you have an updated supervisor spreadsheet so that you have the updated list of supervisors to send volunteers to. So those tools are coming. Now, I also want to mention some additional tools that I'm going to strongly recommend that you take time to review. And the first is the department orientation guide. Let me pull up if I can. Hang on a second. Let's go ahead and take a quick trip to the exchange. So one thing you're going to want to do is go on to the exchange, and you're going to want to access the volunteer engagement strategy toolkit. All right, because they've got some great tools for us to use. And here you go. All right. This is what I want you to take a look to review. And this is the department interview guide under screen and place. And if you pull this up, what this tool is it's really a fantastic checklist for how to prepare for and how to successfully deliver an interview. At this time, I've not received any guidance to state that, this is a required tool to use. But my recommendation, because there is that possibility that these tools are going to become requirements, I would recommend that you try to start implementing this as soon as possible. And one great thing about this that I really like is that this is an actual check. It's an actual usable template. So you can read through this and you can actually use it as an actual checklist in real time. So it defines for you the key tasks and objectives of the interview and the quantitative milestones. And then it gives you a checklist of things you want to do before the interview and during the interview, and for the first time, and after the interview as well. And for the first time, we're actually being given a department interview template that we can use. And it's pretty cool because you can fill it out and you can make notes. And I mentioned and essentially these are the questions that you really want to be asking yourself after the interview to determine whether or not that volunteer is a good match for the department and the position. Do they meet the expanded department, position, and team requirements? Can they complete the onboarding requirements within an acceptable time frame? You want to ask them if they're able to accomplish that. What level of support and preferred type of communication does the volunteer feel they need to be successful? This is going to be important depending on the geography and position needs. So you may meet, will the support be virtual, email, phone? And can they meet the time commitment that the position requires? And then you have the 5 dimensions. So you have accountability, and you have some specific questions under accountability. There's service commitment and some specific questions that you can ask under service commitment, flexibility, and some questions, technical professional knowledge, and some questions, and then sense of urgency. And then there's a rating tool where you can, based upon their answers, rate them. And the total score that you come up with helps you determine whether or not they really aren't a good candidate for the position, or they're a really dynamite candidate. So I would recommend that you check it out. They also give you a sample email template that you can use. And I would recommend that you use this. So after you can use this as the email that you send if you've left a message that you follow up with. This is an email that you can send, the volunteer after you've approved them. And of course, custom tailor it as needed. And then they have some great links to some additional information that might be helpful to you. So check it out. We've been given this tool. I think it's a great tool, and I would get some practice using it. Now, again, you don't have to ask all of these questions. I think like what they want you to try to do is just pull questions that really lend well to the position, to get more information, to get a little bit more information from the applicant. Or you can choose maybe one question from each section, but I mean, you're not expected to go through all of these questions, of course, but I think it would be a good idea that we all start to incorporate some of these questions into our interviewing so that we're following, the national standard. Okay, the next form I want you to be comfortable with and understand is I will be sending this to you. It's the Trained People Pilot Information and Requirements for the cohort that we participated in. I have provided this in the past, and I believe I've even included these instructions in our standard operating procedure. I will ensure that this is updated for you if it's not already included, and I will get this out to you this week. But these are step-by-step instructions that you can refer to, that guide you how you need to be documenting disaster cycle services notes. And the key change is that they're asking us to preface our notes with DCS : before the notes that we put in the description. That doesn't mean, though, that you're going to have to go back and change all of your notes, nor does it mean that if you haven't done this, that's hurt our metrics. There are only 3, and those are listed down here, 3 key milestones that tie directly into our metrics, and that is the department interview, the department orientation, and supervisor assigned. So you have to make sure that when you're documenting these notes, you're documenting them in alignment, in not only documenting them appropriately, correctly, but that you're also documenting them as per the timeline, so that the interview needs to be completed within 7 days from receiving the referral. The orientation then needs to be completed within 7 days from your interview. And the supervisor should be assigned no later than day 14. And yes, we're kind of shortening up that process even a little shorter than what's recommended here, but it's important that we do that because we're only giving our supervisors another 14 days to begin engaging their volunteers and to provide a second orientation. So it is really important that we work quickly through this process. So how do you document? Well, it's very easy. Now, it's important that the date be accurate. Now, the date stamp, it's 6:41 p.m. right now, and this defaults at 2:12 a.m. I can try to change the time. Sometimes the system will grab it, sometimes the system won't, and if it doesn't, don't worry. The timestamp's really isn't important. It's the date that's important. Because again, they're looking to see that we've completed these steps within the appropriate amount of time. So the first thing that we have to document is, of course, the department interview. So we would click department interview, and then in the description, we have to use DCS : interview complete. And then the status would be completed, and then I would click submit. Same thing, you scroll down to the very bottom here, department orientation. I would document that the same way, but this would say orientation complete. And then when I assign the supervisor, same thing, supervisor assigned, and then supervisor assigned. And then submit. So just anything else that you document, like the second interview would be, you could use this interview for the second interview. And it's, there's nothing specific that's going to be tied to any subsequent interview after the first interview. So you can document the profile business as usual for everything else that you do. But when you're documenting the 3 key milestones, you have to label them as either department interview, department orientation, or supervisor assigned. You have to mark that it's completed, and you have to put DCS : and then either orientation complete, interview complete, or supervisor assigned, contingent upon what it is. The other thing I want to remind you to do is to make sure that you are copy pasting your career path summary onto the profile, because we need to see what you've reviewed during your career path discussion with the volunteer. We need to see what positions they're training for. And the easiest thing to do is to just copy paste that from the email that you've sent, so that you're not typing those notes from the beginning. Just copy paste. The other thing that I often do is I'll just save a copy as documents. And that's another thing that you could do, is just please refer to documents. Then you have a cleaner copy of it. Sometimes, most of the time when you copy paste a lot of text into the comments section, what happens is that it doesn't, you lose your formatting. So the benefit of uploading that as a document is that you can see the PDF file. You can more easily read it, but it's up to you. Those are your 2 options. And you do have to do separate entries. So you still have to document the outbound calls that you make. When you actually make a notation about the career path summary, that needs to be a second entry. It's either notes or interview or, outbound call. Those do have to be separate entries, so we're still documenting profiles as we used to. The difference is that you have to have those 3 milestones and you have to work them according to the timeline. Now, the other tool that I wanted to very briefly introduce you to is the Promotion Manager tool. I'm not going to go into a deep dive on this because there is a training that you can take, and we can do a future workshop if it's helpful. But the Promotion Manager is an option that you can use in addition to or in lieu of a spreadsheet. I personally think that the spreadsheets that we've set up are every bit as easy to manage as Promotion Manager, but this is a tool built right into Volunteer Connection that you can use. And it's pretty easy to use. What you do is you go to Recommendations and you would add a volunteer. You would add the gap that they're training for. So like, for example, if it's me, I'm going to enter my name, Dawn Moore. Let's say I'm training for let's see here. Let's say I'm training for Feeding Service Associate. Well, right here, I can put all the notes that I want to. Well, I think you can. I can put notes here. So if I wanted to actually track training information right here, I could do that right in Volunteer Connection. And I would click Add. And then when I go back and I look for me and I click View, it tells me the required training for the gap. And it tells me the required training that I've completed. Now, what it doesn't do is it doesn't generate the it doesn't generate the training that you need to complete. So you still have to take these two lists and reconcile them. But this might be helpful as a tool to quickly grab the training requirements. Whether you want to just copy paste this and then put this on your spreadsheet, or you want to or again, you could actually use this tool to track promotions and to track, to make your notations here if you prefer to keep things contained to the system. So I'll link you to a training for Promotion Manager. You don't have to use it, but you do have to have some sort of tracking mechanism in place to ensure that you're quickly identifying when your volunteers are ready for a promotion. And Phyllis will always spot check to see if a volunteer is ready for a promotion when she receives the health status record information. But that does not mean that, but we really need for each DWET member to assertively track that process as well. And you do a great job with that. I'm not insinuating in any way that you're not. It's just something that we want to keep up with to ensure that we're continuing to work within the timelines, the appropriate timelines. So I know this is a lot of information, and I do apologize for the mouthful, and I thank you sincerely for taking, I said mouthful because, excuse me, I meant to say earful. I apologize for that, but I really appreciate your attention to this matter. As mentioned, additional tools will be provided to you, and I do strongly recommend that you take the time to read through the volunteer engagement strategy toolkit and start using the tools that have been provided to us. And thank you so much for everything that you do. And there will be more to come later. Thank you.